Welcome everyone to the EA Global Summit 2022. This is Vaibhavi from the EA Global Summit organizing team. Firstly, I would like to start by thanking all of you for your interest in joining us for this session. This session will be conducted by Phil Shudley from Dunstan Thomas. Phil is a principal consultant with over 16 years of experience in enterprise architect, modeling in UML, BPMN, SysML, and Archimate 3.1, to name a few. He specializes in providing custom solutions in enterprise architect using MDGs and scripting. Phil will be sharing his expertise on managing shared assets using EA RAS. We will be muting all the participants throughout the session. For any queries, during and after the session, we request you to use the chat window to drop your questions to the speaker. We will be reading out some of the questions and the speaker will answer them during the question and answer session at the end. To enable collaboration and communication with Phil and other EA practitioners directly after the session, we request you to visit the dedicated channel for this session in Microsoft Teams. Phil and several other speakers have kindly accepted to stay in the channel to have a one-to-one discussion and answer your queries. The link to the MS Teams channel is posted in the chat window for your quick reference. In case of any difficulty in connecting to Teams, please reach us in the chat window or write to us at registrations@eaglobalsummit.com. Thanks once again for your interest and support to EA Global Summit 2022. We look forward to a wonderful session with Phil. Over to you, Phil.
Okay, many thanks, and thank you very much for the very kind introduction. Now, just want to confirm that my screen is being shared. You should be able to see a PowerPoint presentation. I just double check that is, yep, okay, everything's fine. So this is me, that's a photograph of me, and I will very quickly go through this because in the very kind introduction, basically everything was said that's on this slide. So we'll go straight into the actual topics of this particular seminar. What is new is I am going to present a Spark Systems webinar in conjunction with Spark Systems Australia in October, and that will be on decision model notation and in the executable state machines. So look out for that. But today we are all about reusable asset service. So the first thing we're going to do in this session is, what is it? What is a reusable asset service? And why would you consider using a reusable asset service? There is a specific infrastructure that you'll need if you are considering using a reusable asset service. And there's all sorts of permissions and sections that you need to be aware of. So all the background that is necessary ready for our demonstration. I will be demonstrating RAS live, not pre-recorded, using EA16 and a typical scenario which we'll work through. And that will be conducted in a short while. And then after the demonstration, we'll open up a Q&A session, which will then continue on to MS Teams. So, what is a reusable asset service? Well, it is a single repository, and this repository has certain constraints, which we'll meet off in a moment. But what it does is it contains multiple assets which could be imported into other repositories. Now, the reason why would you have this, and what I would like to say immediately, is this is not a new feature of Enterprise Architect, which may come as some surprise. With these summits are usually about new features. This has been around for some years, and I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, it was introduced when the cloud services first came into EA. But for some reason, it hasn't been very popular. Loads of my clients over the past years have never heard of it, have never used it. I've only experimented with it. But recently, a client had a scenario for them to work with, and I thought, RAS would fit that scenario. Hence, I created a proof of concept, the demo for today, and also this is the motivation for sharing my findings with you today. So why would you want to do it? Well, it is very, very, very common in organizations that teams want to share assets. Now, when we mean assets, we're primarily looking at packages, diagrams, elements, and all their connections. But there are other things that can be shared, of course. This is, the mantra of define once, use many. And traditionally, what people do, or they try to do, is to put a single repository with libraries and then share those libraries. Because the problem with that is everybody can see everything. Sure, you can control access with permissions. You can control access with locks, but you can't control viewing. Everybody can see everything. And you could possibly reuse as links with, and we shouldn't have access to that particular asset. So putting everything in one large repository may not suit your needs. If you use multiple repositories, then you have the problem of how do you integrate everything? How do you control everything? How do you merge everything? And there are solutions out there, absolutely. And RAS is just one of those. So it allows organizations to have a single, separately managed repository of shareable assets. So what is it all about in the infrastructure? You must have ProCloud Server. You don't need to enable Pro features, unless, of course, you want to use Prolaborate and all those kind of extra goodies, then you'll need the licensed version. But for just PCS, you can have the standard ProCloud Server without all the Pro features. That is essential. You have an RAS repository. Now, the RAS repository is just a good old standard EA repository. It can be FEAP, Firebird, but what I use is SQL Server. So I've got a SQL Server based EA repository with the same tables as you would find in your normal repository, and that serves as an RAS repository. You then have an administrator. Now, the administrator hasn't got it's not an onerous task. Basically, they create the RAS repository, and there's an overall administrator password, which they use to do, tidying up, deleting, archiving. There's all sorts of other bits and pieces. Today, due to time, we're not going to go into the administration of the RAS. We're going into the actual use of the RAS from a modeler's perspective. So you have teams, and those teams will have their own individual repositories. And those individual repositories could be hosted locally, they can be centralized, they're just EA repositories. And what you do is there are two levels of permission. You can have a read-only permission, which allows you to view and import an asset, or you can have full permission, which allows you to store an asset, right? We'll see this in the demonstration. Unless you know the password or passwords, nobody can see anything in the RAS. So unless you've got the right permissions, the right passwords, what is in the RAS is totally invisible to you and your team. Sure, it does rely on people knowing passwords and not passing those passwords on to people who shouldn't know them. But at least it is a way of protecting assets. The actual structure and permission of a reusable asset service is you have the RAS repository, and this is divided into a number of storages. Now, a storage is regarded as a section, a subdivision of the RAS repository. And these have two passwords, which are assigned when the storages are created. There's complete access and there's read-only access. The storage can have 0 or more assets. Now, if you look at the detailed Sparks documentation on reusable asset service, you'll see there are a vast number of different assets. Now, we are going to concentrate on the most common, which are packages and everything that's contained in a package, because realistically, that is what the RAS is going to be used for. But in addition to packages, you can also store files, documents, Word documents, PDF documents, images. You can also store training guides, learning centers, even source code can be there. I personally have never used an RAS for those extra for things. I've only ever used it for packages and so on. But the principles are the same, right? The principles are the same. So before we get into our demonstration, because obviously you're more interested in seeing it in action than perhaps you are in knowing about the background, let's just set up a typical scenario. And this is based upon what a client said to me recently. Let's assume we have an enterprise architecture project underway. And we have a business team. And that business team say, yeah, I'm aware of the great big picture of enterprise architecture, but I'm only interested in business and strategy. You'll notice that I'm using a lot of Archimate terms here. Just for information, the models you'll see being shared in the asset system today are Archimate models, but any technology will work. Any model will work. It's not restricted to enterprise architecture. This is just to set a realistic demonstration. So you have a team leader and others, and I said the team leader has complete access, others have read-only access. But yeah, so basically the team leader is responsible for ensuring that the assets are up to date. They only need that section of the architecture. We have a technology team which are only going to be concerned with applications, application structure. Similarly, we could have an infrastructure team and so on and so forth. So the business team don't see the technology models don't see the business team. But you say to yourself, but that's not enterprise architecture. Enterprise architecture is bringing those two layers together. Absolutely right. So let's have an architecture team whose responsibility is to use the business team assets, use the technology team assets, bring the two together. And that is what we're going to do. Okay. So here's the demonstration. So I'll get out of the PowerPoint and go on to Enterprise Architect. Okay. Now, you should now be seeing Enterprise Architect. This is Enterprise Architect 64-bit version 1605. So it's the latest build of Enterprise Architect. And although I won't verify this, behind the scenes, I have installed locally a RAS on SQL Server, and I've also got version 5 64-bit PCS running in the background, doing everything on localhost. The reason is because I'm not relying on any remote server being available for this demonstration. I want to be in total control. But the demonstration is relatively small scale, but the RAS is fully scalable. So just because we're showing only a handful of our assets, don't be thinking that the RAS can't handle large, full-scale models. It can. So, without further ado, let's get into the demonstration. And this is where I'll be a little bit more, explain things as we go on. The other thing I would notice, and this is just the way I use Enterprise Architect, I have my own perspective set up. So I'm not using the default all perspectives. I've got my own perspective. And I've got my code generation toolbar set to none because I don't want to be influenced by any programming languages. It's just something I do. I just use the language setting of none rather than the default of Java. I've done it ever since I've used EA. So over here on the pin section, I've got quick access to my repositories. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to be a member of the business team. So let's open up the business repository, and we're going to connect to this business repository as the team leader, who happens to be a guy called Sam. All right. So again, as well as showing you RAS, I'm showing you my style of EA. This is a free gift. All my repositories that I create in EA all have a table of contents diagram, which is the default, using navigation cells to all other diagrams. It's just something I like to do. So we have a capability viewpoint, which if you're familiar with Archimate, you will recognize this as a standard Archimate diagram, right? So that is just a resource map viewpoint and so on. I won't go through all the others, but just taking one at random, we have a product viewpoint and so on. Okay. These models are based upon an actual example, by the way. They're not, generic, shall we say. Now, you will notice, if for those of you who are not familiar with EA16, you'll notice there are some changes to the project browser. So you get this ellipsis, which are all the elements which never used to be in the browser. So these are the navigation cells. And then you have the packages, and then you have the diagrams and so on. There is a bug in EA16 where the diagram is last in the list. It should be first in the list, but that's being corrected. And as usual, here is our element library, right? So all our elements are in here, and all our viewpoints are in here, right? So we've got the strategy layer and so on. The multi-layer, by the way, is for a diagram which brings together elements in the business layer and the strategy layer. So that is an example of a cross-layer diagram. So that's all created, all right? So let's now assume that the business team are ready to share this asset. So what you do is you connect to the Reusable Asset Service. That is available on the Publish menu, a Publish ribbon, I should say, not menu, shows my age. And there you'll see Reusable Assets, and there is a special view for the reusable asset. And the first thing you do is you use this navigation bar to connect to the asset. Now, I've already got it set up. So it's localhost. This is just a standard cloud connection. And what I don't like, okay, I'll be honest, I'm not going to say everything is perfect, is it comes up immediately with a password entry. Now, if I don't know what I want to look at, why do I need to enter a password? I don't know what I want to look at yet. So explain what's going on. In this list is a number of storages, which I've already created in advance. And the first item in that list, EA assumes that's the one you want. And it's asking you for the read-only or full access password. Now, if you don't want that one, then you can simply cancel, and then you can explore what storages are there, and then you can choose which one you want. Personally, I think when you connect to the reusable asset service, you should just get this list and then be prompted for the password. But I'm being picky. It's just my own personal experience I'm sharing with you. So I want the strategy and business layer. So yes, now I want the password. Now, if I want to register an asset, I want to put an asset into the RAS, I'll need the full access password. So I'll enter that. If I happen to get it wrong, it will tell me. Luckily, I didn't make any typos. And you'll notice that there's these tabs along the bottom here. And just to show there's no cheating going on in the demo, there's nothing at all in that particular storage. So all I've done is I've just created the storage in advance. Creating the storage is really, really easy. You just use this icon, enter the RAS administration password, and then you can create the storage. All right. I won't go and demonstrate that. It's really, really easy to do. Let's get on and use the RAS itself. So if I go back here, what I'd like to do now is register. So I can pick up anything in my repository. I can pick up a package. I can pick up a lower level package. I'm going to actually register the entire Archimate business view, this guy here. So I click that, and then I click register. And it says, and this is where the original version of the RAS had some issues. Now, EA is really, really clever in what it does. It will not let you register this until you've checked dependencies. So not only will it check this in, it will say, well, if you want this as an asset, you'll also need this. So for example, and there is an example coming up in a little while, if I check strategy layer, which is just a diagram, checking that into the reusable asset service without the elements is a little bit silly. So EA will say, this package needs these elements, you need these as well. And that is done by this check dependency. There are 3 levels of dependency, and I'm going to do complete, which I tend to do all the time, and that will recurse as low as it possibly can, a bit like the traceability window. So you go check dependency, and in no surprises, there are no dependencies because everything is self-contained. So I can just simply register. And now that is, if I look at the contents, you see all the contents in the reusable asset service. Right, perfect. Okay, we're going to do this a couple of times, but I won't go so slowly through it because I wanted to show that there's no sort of pre-registration done. So that I can do another little demo a little bit later, what I'm going to do is show an example of this dependency. Rather than just publish or register the entire business layer, let's just share a single viewpoint. So this one is the capability map viewpoint. So I'm swapping my storage to capability map viewpoint. And I'm going to, again, full access. Again, there are no contents. So there's my capability map viewpoint. So rather than use a top level package, I'm using a lower level package, which just has a diagram there. So I do register. Notice what happens when I say check dependency. Now it says, well, this is dependent upon an area in strategy layer elements called capabilities. Would you also like to include this? And you say, yes, please. And now you need to check the dependency of that. It says, some of these elements are linked to other elements. Would you like to include those? And you can say yes or no. You don't have to have this. And finally, it says, well, the elements you have in this asset are also used on another viewpoint. Well, because I'm only publishing the capability map viewpoint, I'm going to say thanks, but no thanks. It will warn me that I may have missing things. That's fine. So now I'm ready to publish this. All right. You can also put comments and notes on. For speed, I didn't bother in any of these. So let's register that. Done. Okay. So now we've actually shown how to register a full package and a viewpoint. So just because we need to have everything in place for another next sessions in the demo, we're going to repeat this process with the resource map viewpoint. So bear with me if I do this. It doesn't take too long. So rather than just talk it through, I'll just do it. So have full access to this, select the package, register, check the dependencies, click OK. And we're all ready. Now you may be curious as to why that happened a lot quicker than before. It's because it already knows that some of those things are in the repository. So there we are, and away we go. Register. Ka-ching. Done. Perfect. So that is now completely stored into the RAS, the business layer. So the business team has done what they need to do. So what I'll do is go back to start page and go into the application layer. Right. And again, connect to the reusable asset service. And this time, I'm going to store the application layer. Well, register the application layer to be precise. So there is the Archimate application view. So look, it's very similar structure to the business layer. And what I'll do is I will just register that, check the dependencies. There are none. and register. Done. Perfect. So now we've got everything in the reusable asset service. We now tell our architecture team, hey guys, we're all ready to go now. The business layer's there, the application layer's there, everything is fine and hunky-dory. Over to you guys to do your magic. So what we do is we again swap our repository, and just to show there's absolutely nothing in here. Absolutely nothing. Right. Well, I've got the architecture business view. I've got that. Actually, I can get rid of those. I don't need those. Let's get rid of that. And I'll get rid of that. Right. So we just got an empty repository for all intents and purposes. So I'll go into reusable assets, ka-ching, like that. And what I will do is I will just use a read only at this moment in time. So I'll use the business layer, like that. And what I'd like to do is import this to a package, and I can import it in at the root level or view level or any other level actually. And there's the contents. So they're all there, and I just say import. Now I've got a choice of importing with dependencies or importing just a package. Now, usually you'll import package and dependencies. And there we are. So there is everything that was in the business repository now in our enterprise architecture repository. So let's repeat that process with the application layer. And we're done. Right. So now we've got all the building blocks. Okay. So now we can have a bit of fun. Let's now go into the Archimate application view and look at the application user viewpoint. This one. Now, this is an application, as you can see, an application diagram. And what I want to do is connect this up to the business layer, right, as an enterprise architect. So I will go into the business layer, and I'm assuming I know what is needed to be connected. So I'm going to start linking something to this. Now, I did do this earlier, so I do have a cheat sheet in front of me. But as the enterprise architect, I know that links to a business function or business process. So if I look in here, I will see the business processes, and the one I want is this one. So I just use that like that as a link, and I can now do a relationship between them, which happens to be a serving relationship. Make that a bit bigger, like that. Okay. Now, as a bonus, of course, and I'm sure you listening in are aware of this, but now I can use the magic of EA. I can say, well, what else do I need to add to this diagram? And I just use insert related elements, select what I need to add on here, and they are all added immediately like this. So I can very quickly build up a model like that. I'm not going to worry too much about making it look pretty. Okay. Now, this is also requiring a relationship. So this is the relationship between the two layers, here and here. Okay. Now, I do have time. We're not running out of time, so I'll just complete this by inserting the related elements. So I'll insert the junction and the VLE courses. Right. So there's a VLE course, and there's a junction, and finally insert related elements. I'll just put the others on. Now, it doesn't matter what this model is representing. It is, in fact, a model of online training, but that's purely for information, right? And then we have this thing here. Now, the reason why I built this up is not to show you how to build a model in EA, because you know that, but to show you something else with the reusable asset service. And that is the enterprise architect says, hang on a minute, the business layer have got something wrong here. They've missed out something. This function or this process is actually related to this product. It is, in fact, a serving relationship across there. So that needs to be on the model. Now, of course, this is not in the original business layer repository we saw earlier. So what we're going to show you now is how does something get updated because someone else has made a change. So the architects have said to the business layer, the business team, do you know what? There is some kind of anomaly in your model. We have corrected it. And rather than them just tell the business team and the business team update it, the business team can use the reusable asset service to update their model. Yeah. So what this enables us to do is we'll need to go back. Let's save our work before we do anything else. Go back to the reusable asset service. And what I would like to do is to have full access to the strategy and business layer. So let me put in that and LAY full. Okay. Now, let's have a look at the properties. There are some properties here, and it says here that if you look down at the properties, it will say that the properties are complete or draft. Now, the difference is that when a storage is in draft, if you then overwrite it, that is, you register, it will completely overwrite what's there. So it's just a bit like a normal EA repository. If you make changes, it overwrites. If you say it's complete, you cannot overwrite it. So when you re-register, you'll have to re-register this as version 2. Okay? So let's make sure this all works properly. And so now I've got the argument business view. And if I register this, right, you'll see there it says current version. If I put that as 2.0, I will get 2 versions of this particular repository, this asset, thereby automatically creating a history of things, automatically creating an as is, to be. So I'll check the dependencies and then register. So now here we have version 2, and we can actually also see version 1 as well. But if we look at the business layer, just look at the business layer again. Sorry, I got out of the password there. There we are. So it is actually now version 2. All right. Okay. Perfect. So now let's go back to our business example as Sam. And here is the business view. Connect to the reusable asset service again. You'll see this done many times. Whoops, so I've made a typo error. Here we go. Ka-ching. All right, 2. And if you look down there, you can see I can see version 2 or I can see version 1. So how is that done? Well, it's done by baselines. It uses EA's baseline system to create multiple versions of the same thing within the same repository. Really cool. Now, here is the thing. If I import this, right, and I just say here, I say import package dependencies, it will say, and read this very carefully, import selected version of package and all its dependencies. This will overwrite. Now, because it's version 2, the GUIDs of all the assets are the same as the GUIDs in version 1. So if I simply go yes, it will just go whack over this entire Archimate business view. Right? Now that may be exactly what I want. So this is exactly what I'm going to do right now. So I just say, yeah, okay, I want the latest version. I'm happy with that. So notice you don't get 2 business views. No, of course you don't. But if I look at the actual diagrams now, if I look at the business layer and I look at I think it's this one I want there. I'll soon find out. It's one of these anyway. You'll notice that here are my diagrams as usual. And if you recall, what we did was we actually changed one of the products. So if I look in the products down here, where are they? Products, right? And it was the product called, I forgot which one it was now. I know what I'll do. Sorry, I'm being a little bit typical modeler here. What I want to do is look at the business function, or business process, undertake. I want to find out where that is on a diagram. There it is. Now, what I want to do here is insert related elements, and there you'll see the product there, like that. Now, you say, hey, EA's got a bug. Where's the relationship? It's not there. Gotcha. Now, when I did this caused me end of worry. I even got to the point I'm going to send a bug report to Sparks. It is not a bug. It's a gotcha. Now, and I've deliberately done this to show you something that you may come across in Enterprise Architect, particularly when you're doing enterprise architecture modeling. When you're doing enterprise architecture modeling, you have many diagrams with many elements, and they all have different relationships. And one of the features of EA is if you create a relationship between A and B, what happens is those relationships appear on all diagrams, and it's a nightmare. So what I tend to do is I use a really funky feature of a diagram called freeze visible. There, freeze visible. Now, it's that which is causing this relationship not to show up because it wasn't there originally. So EA is doing exactly what I'm asking it to do. But this caused me no end of worry. I thought, I know there's a relationship between there. I know I could look at traceability, insert related elements. So all you need to do is uncheck freeze visible, save the diagram, reload it, and ka-ching! And you'll notice, as if by magic, there are some other relationships that appear. So if you ever see in EA, you know there's a relationship. You created it, and it's not showing up on the diagram. Check the freeze visible. So just before we go to the last quick demo, is the question arises, well, supposing I don't want to overwrite my Archimate business view with version 2, what can I do? Well, I guess stating the obvious, what I would do is simply copy this package to the clipboard and paste it as a copy. That will give me new GUIDs. Make it version 1. But when I import version 2, right, or rename that version 2, the copy is actually version 1. I'll have my 2 copies. Now I must confess I haven't actually done that. I can't do it in the time constraint now, but that is one way you could preserve an original version by importing from assets. You just make a copy of your packages. Okay. Just pause to see anything else. There is another feature which I won't show as well, is you can actually compare your current model with what's in the reusable asset service. There is a comparison. And all it does is it will just do a baseline comparison. So you can do comparisons between version 2 and version 1. It's no point now because I've got version 2 because I've done it. I'm up to date. But there is a way you can actually compare, and you'll get the standard baseline comparison against the 2 versions. Right. So as the final version, little final demo I would like to do is go back right to the very beginning and create a brand new repository. And this repository is just going to be using the 2 viewpoints that I added as assets earlier on. So I'll give it a quick little name like that. Create a view like that. Okay, now I'm going to go to the reusable asset service like that and cancel. And what I'd like to do is go to the capability map viewpoint and just get this. Right now, the reason why I'm doing this demo is before you saw it just imported a package, but now let's import this with dependencies, and what it will do is it will not only import the diagram, but it's now, as you can see, it's imported all the resource elements and capabilities elements as well. All right. Okay. So it's done everything. So what I can now do is I can do the next viewpoint and import the resources map viewpoint. And for some reason, and I don't know why, my capability map diagram didn't come in. I may have made a slight error earlier, but there's the resources map viewpoint, so it did bring in the diagram. I'd imagine what I've done is I forgot to put the actual diagram in. But notice that I don't get two copies of the capabilities and the resources. EA is clever enough to know that when I imported the first viewpoint, that's a capability layer viewpoint, and I imported the elements, it was clever enough to know that the elements were there. Now, for some reason, the diagram isn't there. I think I know what I did, and apologies for that. When I registered it as an asset, I unchecked the diagram, and I unchecked the wrong diagram, because if you recall, when I registered the asset for the capability map viewpoint, it said there were two diagrams. One was the resources map, one was the capability map. And I believe in my enthusiasm to demonstrate this, I unchecked the wrong one. So that's why the diagram came in. It's not something the RAS did wrong. It was something I did wrong. It did exactly what it was told to do. So that's why I got one viewpoint. But the purpose of this is just to show you that if you do bring in a diagram like the resources map viewpoint, and it's dependent on other elements, they will also be put in. The other thing is that once you've got the structure imported from the reusable asset service, you can move these packages around and create new packages because it's all done by GUID. So you can change the structure if you wish. You can even change the name, but I don't suggest you do. So it's all nicely synchronized. So in conclusion, and I'll go back to the so that concludes the demos. There's many more things you can do with RAS, many more. But what I suggest you do is this. Let's go back to the PowerPoint slide. What I suggest you do is, if you've been sort of motivated or inspired or even just curious about the RAS, do what I just did. Create yourself a little mini model and that mini model is in sections and teams. Set up a locally hosted RAS, so you're not worried about getting databases and involving IT teams. Just, if you can, of course, just do it all on localhost. You can use FEAP files if you prefer, so you don't have to do SQL Server. And try it out. Just, you'll learn far more and get a lot more experience in the RAS by trying the things out, just like I did. Little proof of concept. And yeah, I mean, it's not going to solve all the shareable problems that you have. No, but it will go a long way to solving some of those or addressing some of those issues. Of course, if you do have your RAS on a server, the response time is going to be not as rapid as my super fast local disk here. But the principles are the same and it will work. And you could have more than one RAS, of course. You don't have to have a single RAS. You can have RAS per team and then an RAS for the organization. There's all sorts of permutations and things like that. So we've got about 5 minutes, I think, and before the conclusion of the session at 10 o'clock UK time. So if you do have any questions which I can answer now, then I will do so. And if otherwise, I will be around for a period of time on the MS Teams chat. I'll stay around as long as there's activity. Hopefully there will be. But I will pop in from time to time over the next few days, just so if anyone comes up with a question, oh, I tried the RAS, but it did, then please post those. The forum is active. I don't think there is a time expiry on the MS Teams. So thanks very much for your attendance today, and hopefully you've been inspired and the whole session was useful to you.
Yeah, I'm sure, Phil, they all are. So thank you, Phil, and thank you everyone for your time. Well, as I said earlier, I'm sure the session was informative and it gave deeper insights into the topic. So Phil, now since we are towards the end of an hour, what we can do is we can move directly to Teams and entertain all the questions there.
Yep.
So for all the attendees, Phil will now be available in MS Teams to have a detailed discussion and answer more questions. And the link to Microsoft Teams is already posted in the chat window. Any difficulties connecting, please write to us at registrations@eaglobalsummit.com. And thank you once again, and we look forward to hosting you all in another wonderful session at this summit shortly. Thank you, Phil. We can move to MS Teams now.
You're welcome. Thank you very much indeed.
Everyone.
Yeah, bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.